Christmas dinner was supposed to be simple: one table, too much food, the same arguments everyone pretended weren't coming. I arrived with my 7-year-old daughter holding my hand, her fingers cold from the walk up the driveway, her backpack bumping against her coat because she insisted on bringing it inside. She always brought it. I didn't stop her. Inside the house smelled like roasted meat and cinnamon candles, the kind of smell people associate with warmth, the kind that lies. My sister was already seated, legs crossed, glass of wine in hand, smiling like she owned the place. She always sat at the head of the table when she visited. No one questioned it. My parents moved around her like she was fragile furniture that couldn't be bumped. Her kids were loud, bouncing in their chairs, interrupting each other, dropping rolls on the floor. No one corrected them. My daughter climbed into her seat quietly. She folded her napkin the way I'd taught her and stared at her plate like it was homework. She didn't touch anything yet. She never did until she knew the rules of the room. "Wow," my sister said, looking me up and down. "You look tired." It wasn't concern. It never was. It was a reminder. "I'm fine," I said, because that's what I always said. My mom glanced at my daughter's dress. "That's simple," she said, smiling tightly. I sat down without responding. I'd been trained for worse rooms than this. Rooms where silence mattered. Rooms where reacting was a mistake. Dinner started. Forks clinked. Someone passed the potatoes. My dad stared at his plate like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have an answer. My sister talked about her plans for the new year, about how hard things had been for her lately, about how much pressure she was under. Everyone nodded. My daughter took 2 bites of bread and stopped. She lined her peas up without eating them. I noticed. I always noticed. Halfway through the meal, my sister set her fork down slowly, not casually, on purpose. "We need to talk," she said. The table went quiet. I didn't look at her right away. I took a sip of water and set the glass down carefully. My pulse stayed steady. Years in uniform had taught me how to keep my face neutral, even when my stomach dropped. "This isn't working anymore," she said. "Mom and Dad agree." I looked at my parents. My mom avoided my eyes. My dad didn't look up. "Working how I asked." My sister tilted her head like she was being patient with a child. "You show up and everything gets tense. You make people uncomfortable." I almost laughed. Almost. She kept going. "And honestly, the situation with your life, it's a lot. We're tired of walking on eggshells." My daughter looked up at me, just for a second. Then she looked back down. "You don't get to talk about my life," I said calmly. My sister shrugged. "Someone has to." There it was, that familiar confidence. The kind that comes from knowing no one will stop you. She leaned forward slightly. "We've all decided it would be better if you left." I waited. "And didn't come back," she added. "At least not here." The words landed flat. No shouting, no drama, just clean, practiced cruelty. My mom cleared her throat. "Christmas is supposed to be peaceful," she said softly. "And honestly, it is better when things are simpler." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She didn't flinch. My dad finally spoke. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." I nodded once. Not because I agreed, because I understood exactly what that meant. My sister glanced at my daughter and smiled. "This isn't healthy for kids to be around," she said. "All this tension." That's when my daughter's hand tightened around her fork. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for clarification or give them a chance to soften it. I'd spent most of my adult life listening to people talk themselves into bad decisions. I recognized the tone. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Mia," I said, keeping my voice even, "grab your coat and your backpack." She slid out of her chair immediately. No questions, no hesitation, like she'd been waiting for permission. My sister scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't look at her. My daughter walked toward the hallway. I watched her go the way she didn't look back, the way she already knew where her shoes were. Something tightened in my chest, sharp and specific. As soon as she disappeared around the corner, my sister crossed her arms. "Good, this is for the best." I stepped into the kitchen instead of following my daughter outside. No one stopped me. They were still convinced this was a tantrum, something I'd cool off from. The cabinet near the counter stuck a little when I opened it. I had slipped the folder into the cabinet earlier, a surprise that was now turning into a ghost. I reached past the serving platters and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were 3 sets of documents, neatly organized, each one labeled with a name. My mom frowned. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I took the first set and tore it cleanly down the middle. The sound was louder than I expected. Paper has a way of announcing itself when a room is quiet. "Stop that," my sister snapped. "What is wrong with you?" I tore the second set, slower this time. My dad stood up. "You're being irrational." I tore the third. My mom stared at the pieces on the counter, her mouth slightly open. This is exactly why I turned away before she finished the sentence. In the hallway, my daughter was already in her coat backpack, on standing straight like she was waiting for instructions. I took her hand. "We're leaving," I said. As we stepped outside, cold air hit my face. The kind that clears your head whether you want it to or not. Behind us, voices rose. Chairs scraped. Someone said my name sharp and sudden. I didn't stop walking. The front door closed behind us, and for half a second, everything went quiet. Not peaceful, just stunned. The kind of silence that happens when people realize they've pushed something too far, but don't know it yet. I walked my daughter down the front steps. She didn't rush. She didn't drag her feet either. She moved with that careful focus kids get when they're trying to be brave for someone else. I unlocked the car, opened her door, and buckled her in. My hands didn't shake. I noticed that because I'd expected them to. Behind us, the door opened again. "Hold on," my sister called out. Her voice had changed. Not apologetic, annoyed, like I'd messed up her evening. I shut my door and started the engine. "Are you seriously leaving like this?" she said louder now. I put the car in reverse. My mom stepped onto the porch, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself, like she was the one being exposed to the cold. "You're overreacting," she said. "You always do this." That almost got a response out of me. Almost. I backed down the driveway slowly. My sister was barefoot on the concrete now, waving one hand in the air, the other holding her phone like she was deciding whether to record me or call someone. "Just come back inside and talk," my dad said, finally appearing behind them. His voice wasn't angry, it was irritated, like he'd been pulled into something inconvenient. I pulled onto the street and drove away. Inside the car, the heater kicked on. My daughter stared straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," I said. "We're not." She nodded, accepting that answer without pushing. She trusted me. That trust sat heavy in my chest. We drove for a few minutes before my phone started vibrating in the cup holder. I didn't look at it. I already knew who it was. The calls came in waves, one after another. I let them ring. At the first red light, my daughter glanced over. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said again, firmer this time. "You didn't do anything wrong." She seemed to think about that. Okay. The light turned green. I didn't have a plan. I had a full tank of gas and a kid who needed dinner. That was enough to work with. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there for a minute with the engine running. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. What was that about the papers? I exhaled through my nose. Of course, that's what stuck. I turned the phone face down and got out of the car. Inside the store, fluorescent lights hummed and holiday music played too loud. We grabbed microwave meals, fruit, and a box of cookies my daughter insisted were for emergencies. At the checkout, the cashier smiled at my daughter and wished her Merry Christmas. My daughter smiled back automatically. I watched her do it. The way kids learn early how to be polite even when they're exhausted. Back in the car, the phone buzzed again. "You need to answer us." I drove to a hotel off the highway. Nothing fancy, clean, quiet, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. The front desk clerk handed me a key and 2 plastic cups for hot chocolate. My daughter kicked off her shoes as soon as we got to the room and climbed onto one of the beds like she'd been holding it together all night. I set the food on the desk and turned on the TV to something loud and mindless. She ate quietly. Halfway through, she looked up at me. "Grandma doesn't like me," she said. It wasn't a question. My chest tightened. "Why do you think that?" She shrugged. "She likes Aunt Rebecca's kids more. She hugs them first. She gives them the good stuff." I didn't correct her. Not right away. Kids notice patterns long before adults admit them. "That's not your fault," I said. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. After she finished eating, she curled up under the blanket and fell asleep with the TV still on. I turned the volume down and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the carpet. My phone buzzed again. "Please come back. We didn't mean it like that." I stared at the screen for a long moment before picking up. "What did you mean then?" I asked. My mom's voice came through too fast. "We were just trying to keep things calm, by telling me to leave and never come back." Silence. Then my sister's voice in the background. Put it on speaker. There was a click. You embarrassed us, my sister said. You can't just rip things up and storm out like that. I didn't storm out, I said. I left. You made a scene, she insisted. You told me to, I said. That's not the point, she snapped. Those papers don't, I said. The word landed heavier than I expected. She stopped talking. You don't get to ask about that, I continued. Not after tonight. My dad cleared his throat. Let's all calm down. I am calm, I said. And it was true. My mom's voice softened. Honey, please, just come back so we can fix this. I looked at my daughter asleep on the bed, her backpack tucked under her arm like a pillow. No, I said. Not tonight. We're family, my sister said. You can't just walk away. I didn't, I said. You pushed. I ended the call and turned the phone off. I sat there for a while, listening to the heater cycle on and off, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle in. Not fear, not regret. Something steadier, something unfamiliar. Back at my parents' house, I knew exactly what was happening. I didn't need to see it. They were standing around the kitchen counter, staring at the pieces I'd left behind, replaying the moment in their heads. Not because they were hurt, because they were confused. Confusion comes before panic. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, my daughter breathing evenly beside me. The room quiet in a way my parents' house never was. For the first time that night, I didn't feel like explaining myself to anyone. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was upset, because my phone stayed off and my brain kept replaying faces. Confusion has a sound. It's quiet at first, like someone counting under their breath. That's what I pictured happening back at my parents' kitchen counter. By morning, I was proved right. I turned my phone on while my daughter brushed her teeth. It lit up immediately. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of each other like receipts no one wanted to look at. My sister's name showed up the most. What were those documents? Why would you tear something like that up? This isn't funny. My mom followed with softer language. Please answer, we're worried. Your father didn't sleep. I didn't respond. I packed our bags, checked out, and drove to a diner a few miles away. My daughter ordered pancakes and drowned them in syrup. I drank bad coffee and watched the door. The phone buzzed again. We found the letterhead. That one I read twice. Letterhead meant someone had stopped guessing and started paying attention. I put the phone face down and paid the bill. On the drive, my daughter hummed along to the radio. She looked lighter. That told me everything I needed to know about the night before. Kids don't lie with their shoulders. I dropped her off with a friend from base who'd offered to watch her for a few hours. I didn't explain much. I didn't have to. She'd seen enough of this kind of thing to recognize the tone. You okay? She asked. I am, I said, and I meant it. I was halfway back to the car when my dad called. I answered this time. What was that paperwork? He asked. No greeting, no small talk. Why does it matter? I asked. There was a pause. Because your sister thinks you destroyed something important. I did? I said. Another pause, longer. Important? How? He asked carefully. I pictured him standing at the counter, glasses on, holding two torn edges together, like he could make them tell him the answer. You tell me, I said. My sister cut in. Don't play games. I'm not, I said. I left when you told me to. That doesn't explain, it explains everything, I said. You just don't like the explanation, she scoffed. You think ripping up some papers makes you powerful. I said. It just makes things final. My mom's voice came through tight. Those were from a law firm. Yes, I said. And they had numbers on them, she added. Yes. My dad swallowed. I could hear it. What kind of numbers? He asked. I didn't answer. My sister laughed sharp and too loud. You're bluffing. I didn't correct her. The call ended on their side this time. By the afternoon, the tone shifted. The messages stopped sounding irritated and started sounding urgent. Can we talk? Please call us. We didn't understand. I ignored them and went grocery shopping. Normal things ground me. Lists, aisles, predictable choices. When you've spent years following checklists that keep people alive, domestic routines feel almost peaceful. I loaded the car with bags and drove to my place. It had been quiet there for weeks. Too quiet. I put the groceries away and sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd paid for myself, the same one no one ever asked to sit at. My phone rang again. This time it was my sister, FaceTiming. I declined it. She called back immediately. I answered with audio only. Why won't you look at me? She snapped. Because it doesn't help, I said. Are you seriously going to pretend this is normal? I'm not pretending anything. You can't just erase something like that, she said. You can't just walk away from family. You told me to, I said. Remember, that was said in anger. It was said clearly, I replied. She lowered her voice. You don't understand what you did. I do, I said. You don't, she insisted. Dad thinks it was some kind of settlement. Mom thinks it had to do with benefits. We're trying to figure out what you destroyed. I leaned back in my chair. Why? Because, she said, exasperated. If it was money, you can't just... I cut her off. If... There it was, the word she couldn't get past. She went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. How much, she asked. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. You told me to leave, I said. Why are you asking me that? Because if you're doing this to punish us, I didn't do it to punish you, I said. I did it because you were clear. My mom grabbed the phone. Sweetheart, please. We didn't mean for things to go that far. Then why did they? I asked. No answer. We raised you better than this, my dad said. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. You raised me to listen. My sister hissed something under her breath. Come back, my mom said. Let's talk face to face. No, I said. That part is over, my sister snapped. You think this makes you better than us, so, I said. It makes me done. I ended the call. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That's the part people misunderstand. Calm isn't the absence of feeling. It's the decision to stop negotiating with people who keep changing the price. An hour later, a text came through from my dad. Your sister found an email address on one of the pages. I stared at it for a moment. Found. Past tense. Good, I thought. Outside, a car slowed near my house and then kept going. I didn't bother checking the window. I knew what was happening. They were piecing it together one scrap at a time, asking the questions they should have asked years ago. My phone buzzed again. Please, we need to understand what we lost. I set the phone down and started dinner. I picked my daughter up as the sun was dropping behind the buildings. She ran to the car and climbed in without asking questions, like she already knew this was the new rhythm. The friend who watched her leaned against the door and gave me a look that said she wasn't going to pry. Call me if you need anything, she said. I will, I replied. And I meant that too. On the drive home, my daughter kicked her feet against the seat in front of her, humming again. That sound hadn't been there the night before. It told me more than any conversation could. Are we sleeping at home tonight? She asked. Yes, I said. Okay, she replied, satisfied. At a stoplight, my phone buzzed. I ignored it. The light changed. I drove. At home, I helped her with homework at the kitchen table, the same table my parents had never sat at. We talked about spelling words and which snack was fair before dinner. Normal stuff. Necessary stuff. While she colored at the counter, I stood at the sink and realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, not like a switch flipping, more like weight moving from one foot to the other. I wasn't bracing anymore. Later, after she showered and put on pajamas, she stood in the doorway of her room. Are we going back there? She asked. No, I said. She watched my face carefully. Ever I paused just long enough to be honest. Not like that. She nodded once. Good. She climbed into bed without another word. I closed her door and leaned against the hallway wall for a moment. The house was quiet. Not tense, just quiet. I hadn't realized how rare that was. My phone buzzed again. We're outside. I walked to the front window and looked through the blinds. My parents' car was parked across the street. My sister sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring at my front door like she was daring it to open. I didn't. The phone rang. I answered it without moving from the window. This is inappropriate, my sister said immediately. Showing up like this. You came, I said. Because you're not answering, she snapped. You told me to leave, I replied. I listened. My mom took the phone. Please, she said. We just want to talk about what I asked. There was hesitation about fixing this. I watched my sister gesture wildly in the car. There's nothing to fix, I said. My dad's voice came through next. That's not true. What do you want? I asked. He cleared his throat. We want to understand. I leaned my forehead against the glass. You understand enough. We don't, my sister cut in. You destroyed something and now you're hiding. I'm not hiding, I said. I'm home. You're punishing us, she said. No, I replied. I'm responding. My mom sniffed. This isn't who you are. I almost laughed at that. Almost. This is exactly who I am, I said. You just didn't notice. There was silence on the line. In the car, my sister threw her hands up. My dad stared straight ahead. My mom looked at the house like she expected it to feel guilty. Can we come inside? My mom asked quietly. No, I said. My sister scoffed. Unbelievable. You don't get to be surprised, I said. You told me to leave. That was one night, my dad said. It was enough, I answered. My sister leaned toward the phone. You think tearing up papers makes you strong? You think this is revenge? I thought about that for a second. No, I said. It's not revenge. It's a boundary. She laughed sharp again. Same thing. It's not, I said. Revenge is loud. This is quiet. My mom whispered my name like it used to mean something. I'm done talking tonight, I said. You should go. You can't just cut us off, my sister said. I didn't, I replied. You did that yesterday. I ended the call and stepped away from the window. Outside, the car didn't move right away. I watched shadows shift as they argued. Then my sister slammed the door and the engine started. The car pulled away fast, tires chirping against the pavement. I stood there until the street was empty again. Back in the kitchen, I finished cleaning up dinner. I packed my daughter's lunch for the next day. I checked the locks. I moved through the house like it was mine. Because it was. When I finally sat down, the phone buzzed again. A message from my dad this time. We didn't mean for things to end like this. I stared at the words, end. That's how they saw it. A loss they hadn't agreed to. I typed back one sentence. You ended it when you told me to leave. I set the phone aside. Later that night, after my daughter was asleep, I sat on the couch with a glass of water and let myself feel tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from being overwhelmed. The kind that comes after a decision sticks. In the quiet, I went over the years like inventory. The holidays where I showed up and kept my mouth shut. The checks I sent without being asked. The calls I took at bad times because it was easier than explaining why I couldn't. I thought about the way my sister had smiled when she told me to leave. The confidence, the certainty that nothing would change. That certainty was gone now. My phone stayed silent for a while, long enough that I almost forgot about it. Then it buzzed once more. An email notification. Sender a law firm. Subject line follow-up on documentation. I didn't open it right away. I set the phone face down and turned off the lights in the living room. I checked on my daughter one last time, standing in her doorway and watching her breathe. I closed the door gently behind me and went back to the couch. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. I woke up before the alarm and lay there listening to the house. No voices through thin walls. No door slamming. No commentary on how early or late I was starting my day. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my daughter breathing down the hall. That quiet had been missing most of my life, and once I noticed it, I couldn't unnotice it. Growing up, my sister was the center of everything. Not loudly, not obviously. It was quieter than that. She was the one adults worried about. The one whose moods were discussed in hushed tones. If she was upset, plans changed. If she struggled, help appeared. If she failed, it was explained away. I was the other one. The one who didn't need much. The one who could handle it. When my sister forgot her homework, my mom drove it to school. When I forgot mine, I learned to remember next time. When my sister cried, my dad sat on her bed until she fell asleep. When I cried, I was told to be tough, not unkindly, just matter of fact. That's how families do it without realizing they're doing it. They assign roles early, then act surprised when those roles harden. At holidays, my sister opened gifts first. Everyone watched. She squealed on cue. Photos were taken. Compliments followed. I opened mine later. Practical things. Useful things. Things that made sense for someone who wasn't supposed to take up much space. If my sister spoke at the table, people listened. If I spoke, the conversation moved on. No one told me to stop talking. They just didn't wait for me to finish. By high school, I'd learned how to be invisible in plain sight. Show up. Do well, don't cause friction. If my sister had a bad day, it was somehow my fault. If I had a good one, it was coincidence. When I told my parents I was thinking about joining the military, my sister laughed. Of course you are, she said. You love rules. My dad nodded like it made sense. My mom worried out loud about whether I'd be safe. But it wasn't fear that stopped her. It was inconvenience. The idea that I wouldn't be nearby anymore. Not emotionally, logistically. They came to my graduation from training, took pictures, told people how proud they were. My sister posted about it online like she'd been there every step of the way. She hadn't called once while I was gone. The pattern didn't change when I started earning money. If anything, it solidified. I sent help when my parents needed it. Utilities, repairs, small emergencies that kept happening. I didn't announce it. I didn't ask for thanks. It felt like maintenance, like keeping something from breaking. My sister talked about how hard it was to budget, how stressful adult life was. Somehow her stress always landed on the rest of us. When I missed birthdays because of training or deployments, my mom said she understood. Then added that my sister was really upset I hadn't been there, that I should try harder next time. As if effort was the issue, I learned to schedule my absence, to apologize in advance, to compensate quietly. When my marriage started to crack under the weight of long separations and missed milestones, my family nodded sympathetically and changed the subject. My sister offered advice she didn't follow herself. "You can't let work come before family," she said. I didn't ask what she thought work meant. When things finally fell apart, no one stepped in. No one asked what I needed. They assumed I had it handled. That assumption followed me everywhere. That's the thing about being the reliable one. People stopped checking. I didn't resent my sister for being favored. Not consciously. I resented the expectation that I would absorb whatever was left over, that I would always adjust. At some point, it stopped feeling like love and started feeling like a transaction I hadn't agreed to. The night my sister told me to leave, none of it felt new. It felt familiar, like the logical conclusion of years of small decisions made in her favor. The difference was, my daughter was there to hear it. And suddenly the pattern wasn't just mine. I told myself for years that it didn't matter, that I was strong enough, that I could take it, that being the one who didn't need much was a kind of freedom. It isn't. It's a slow erasure. Later that morning, I made breakfast while my daughter sat at the counter swinging her legs. She talked about school and a project she was excited about. I listened and answered and poured juice. Normal things. The kind of normal that doesn't require anyone to shrink. "Do you like being a soldier?" she asked suddenly. "I do," I said. "Why?" I thought about it. "Because it makes sense," I said. "You know where you stand." She nodded like that was enough. As she left for school, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked the same posture, same steady expression, but something underneath had shifted. The part of me that had spent years anticipating other people's needs had gone quiet. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from my sister this time. Not angry, not pleading, careful. "We didn't realize how bad things were for you." I stared at it while the kettle boiled. That sentence landed wrong, not because it was untrue, because it placed the responsibility on me, as if my job had been to announce my limits loudly enough for them to care. I typed back 2 words, "You did." I set the phone down and poured the water. The past didn't rearrange itself after that. It didn't apologize. It didn't soften. It just sat there unchanged. But I wasn't inside it anymore. For the first time, I could see the pattern clearly, and once you see it, pretending not to becomes impossible. The uniform made things simpler, not easier, just clearer. You knew where you stood, who you answered to, and what happened if you didn't do your job. Expectations were stated out loud. Consequences were written down. No one pretended not to understand. I learned quickly that showing up mattered more than explaining yourself. You did what you said you'd do. You carried your weight. You didn't get credit for potential. You got it for results. That suited me. I trained hard, passed inspections, took on extra duties when other people found excuses. Not because I wanted praise, but because the rules made sense. If someone didn't pull their weight, it showed. If someone did, it counted. Deployments came and went. Long stretches where days blended together and nights felt too short. I missed birthdays, missed school events, missed the small moments people assume will always be there later. At home, my family told people how proud they were. My mom kept a photo of me in uniform on the mantle. My sister liked to mention me in conversations when it made her look generous. My sister's in the military, she'd say like she'd had something to do with it. When I was away, the calls were sporadic, mostly updates, rarely questions. No one asked how I was sleeping. No one asked what it felt like to come back changed. When I did come home, it was expected that I'd slide back into my role. The reliable one, the one who didn't complain, the one who could handle things. My parents' car broke down during one of my deployments. I wired money without being asked. A roof leak followed a few months later. Another transfer. When utilities spiked, I covered the difference. It never felt like generosity. It felt like maintenance. My sister never acknowledged it directly. She framed it as family taking care of family. She liked the idea, not the responsibility. When my marriage started straining under the weight of distance and missed milestones, my family offered opinions. "You chose this job," my sister said once. "You can't expect everything else to just wait." She said it like a fact, not an accusation. That made it worse. Eventually, my marriage ended. Quietly, no dramatic blow-up. Just two people realizing that love doesn't survive long on scheduled calls and delayed plans. When I told my parents, my mom sighed and said she'd always worried about that. My dad asked if I'd considered a different career path. No one asked if I was okay. Raising my daughter alone meant routines tightened. Every minute mattered. I planned days like operations. Backup plans for backup plans. Babysitters lined up weeks in advance. Emergency contacts updated constantly. The military taught me to anticipate failure. Parenthood taught me why, despite everything I advanced. Promotions came because I earned them. Evaluations were solid. Leadership trusted me. When I spoke, people listened. Not because I demanded it, because I didn't waste time. The contrast was hard to ignore. In uniform, my boundaries were respected. At home, they were treated like suggestions. The benefits paperwork started after an incident tied to my service. Nothing dramatic, no headlines, just enough to change things. Medical reviews, evaluations, meetings where people used careful language and documented everything. It took years. Anyone who's dealt with that system knows it doesn't move quickly. Forms got lost, appointments got rescheduled, decisions came back half-finished. I didn't talk about it at home. There was no point. Every time money came up, it changed the temperature in the room. I learned that early. Eventually, things progressed. Approvals came through in stages. Letters arrived from offices with official seals, summaries, projections. Nothing final yet, nothing tangible. Just confirmation that what I'd been pushing through quietly was finally being recognized. I didn't celebrate. I filed the documents and went to work. In the middle of all that, my parents' financial stress grew louder. My mom mentioned rising costs. My dad complained about interest rates. My sister talked about how unfair it all was, how no one helped them. I helped, quietly. Again. When I thought about using what was coming to clear their debts, it didn't feel like charity. It felt like closing a loop, ending a responsibility that had gone on too long. I planned it carefully. No announcements, no grand gestures, just paperwork, a solution, something clean. That's what they never understood. To me, money wasn't leverage, it was logistics. The night my sister told me to leave, none of that history crossed their minds. They saw the version of me they were comfortable with, the one who would absorb the impact and adjust. They didn't see the years of structure that had taught me something else. That clarity matters, that when lines are crossed, you don't negotiate in the moment, you act. The military doesn't teach revenge. It teaches boundaries. It teaches you that not every conflict is solved by talking longer. As I sat at my kitchen table that afternoon, reviewing emails from my command and ignoring messages from my family, the difference felt stark. One system rewarded accountability. The other punished it by assuming it would always be there. I forwarded a document to my attorney and closed my laptop. The house was quiet again, not tense, just functional. My phone buzzed with another message from my sister. "You think your service makes you better than us?" I stared at it for a moment, then typed back. "No." It taught me when to stop explaining. I set the phone aside and went to start dinner the same way I had the night before. Routine, timing, control. Outside, the sky was already darkening, and for once I wasn't measuring the evening by who might call or what I'd have to smooth over. I moved through the kitchen without rushing, aware of how different that felt. For years, my family had treated my discipline like a resource, something to draw from when things got messy. They never noticed the cost. Now they were starting to. The paperwork wasn't dramatic. That's the part people never expect. No balloons, no instant transfers, just emails, summaries, and careful language that avoided promises while still acknowledging reality. I'd learned to read between those lines years ago. When a system finally stops pushing you back, it doesn't announce it. It simply stops resisting. I kept the documents in a slim folder at the back of a cabinet, not hidden like a secret, just placed where I didn't have to see them every day. I wasn't waiting for money to change my life. I was waiting for it to stop being a variable. The numbers were enough to clear debts that weren't mine, enough to put an end to the quiet monthly transfers I'd normalized, enough to make decisions without asking permission, but nothing had cleared yet. Anyone who's been through that process knows the gap between approval and reality can stretch for months. That gap is where I made a choice. Christmas felt like the cleanest way to handle it. Not emotionally, logistically, everyone would be there. Expectations were already high. A resolution wouldn't look suspicious. It would look seasonal. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my sister, especially not my sister. She had a way of counting money that wasn't hers yet. I drafted letters instead, clear, direct, legal language. Each one addressed to a specific problem, a mortgage balance. Credit cards that never seemed to shrink. A loan my parents pretended didn't exist anymore. I wasn't gifting, I was closing accounts. I didn't imagine gratitude, I imagined relief. The kind that comes when something heavy finally leaves the room. The irony didn't hit me until later. I'd spent years preparing to help people who didn't think twice about removing my chair from the table. The night of Christmas dinner, those documents sat behind the serving platters. I'd placed them there early while my mom was distracted, and my sister was still upstairs fixing her hair. I remember thinking how light the folder felt in my hand, how unceremonious it all was. By the time my sister told me to leave, the decision had already been made for me, not consciously, structurally. Now, days later, my phone kept lighting up with variations of the same question. What was in those papers? Why were they from a law firm? Were those numbers real? My sister sent a message that didn't bother hiding the accusation. You planned this. You came ready to make a point. I didn't respond. My dad tried a different angle. We're just trying to understand what you meant to do. That one almost worked. Almost. Understanding had never been their goal. Control had. I watched the messages come in while I cleaned the kitchen. Each vibration was another attempt to reframe what happened as a misunderstanding instead of a consequence. At some point, my sister stopped texting and started emailing. Long paragraphs, speculation, screenshots of search results, names of firms she thought matched the letterhead. She was piecing it together the way she always did, loudly, publicly, without asking. I didn't correct her. There's a moment when people realize they miscalculated, and it doesn't make them humble. It makes them frantic. My parents called again that evening. I let it ring until it stopped. Then my mom sent a voice message. Her voice shook just enough to sound sincere. We didn't know, sweetheart. If we'd known, things would have gone differently. That sentence sat with me longer than the others. If we'd known. Not if we'd treated you better, not if we'd listened. Just if we'd had the right information. I thought about the years I'd wired money without explanation. The months I'd skipped buying things for myself to cover someone else's emergency. The nights I'd taken calls at bad times because it felt easier than saying no. They'd known enough. The next morning, I forwarded another email to my attorney and closed my inbox. The workday filled itself. Meetings, checklists. Decisions that mattered to people who understood follow-through. At lunch, my sister's name popped up again. You owe us an explanation. I stared at the screen and let myself feel something close to amusement. Oh, I typed back one sentence. You told me to leave, she replied immediately. That doesn't erase what you were going to do. I didn't answer, because she was right about one thing. It didn't erase it. It replaced it. I'd planned to help because I believed in fixing problems quietly. They'd chosen to turn that plan into leverage by showing me exactly where I stood. In the afternoon, my dad called again. This time, his voice sounded older. Your sister thinks you were going to pay off the house. I paused. Why would she think that? Because, he said slowly, she found numbers. I leaned back in my chair. She always finds numbers. He didn't argue. We didn't raise you to be like this, he said finally. You raised me to listen, I replied. I listened. The line went quiet. Later that evening, my daughter sat on the couch with her homework spread out around her. She asked for help with math and leaned her head against my arm while she worked through the problems. The world stayed small and manageable. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my family. It was the firm confirming receipt of a document I'd sent earlier and outlining next steps in neutral professional language. No drama, no urgency, just process. I set the phone down and helped my daughter erase a mistake. Behind the scenes, my family was still scrambling, replaying the dinner in their heads, measuring how close they'd come to something they couldn't quite name. They were learning that the absence of information doesn't mean the absence of consequence. The money hadn't arrived yet, not officially, not in a way that could be reversed or redirected. But the decision had already been made, and that was the part they couldn't change. They hadn't just ruined Christmas. They'd canceled the version of the future they'd assumed would always be there. I closed the folder in my cabinet and turned off the kitchen light, moving through the house with the same steady pace I'd learned years ago. No rush, no hesitation, just the quiet certainty of a plan no one else had access to anymore. The first post went up on a Tuesday morning. I know because I was in a meeting when my phone started vibrating across the table and one of my coworkers raised an eyebrow, like I was about to get bad news. I ignored it until the meeting ended. By the time I checked my phone, there were messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Have you seen what your sister posted? Is everything okay? You might want to respond. I opened Facebook and found it immediately. My sister had tagged our parents and posted a photo from last Christmas. Everyone smiling, everyone looking like a version of themselves they liked better. The caption was long, carefully written, the kind that sounds reasonable if you don't know what's missing. She wrote about family, about boundaries, about how hard it is when someone refuses to take responsibility. She didn't use my name at first. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. Then she did. She said I'd shown up to Christmas looking for sympathy, that I'd embarrassed our parents, that I'd destroyed something meaningful and stormed out when confronted. She said some people take and still act like victims. The comments filled up fast. Praying for your parents, family comes first. Some people don't know how good they have it. I scrolled without reacting. My sister replied to supportive comments within seconds, thanking people for understanding how hard it was to protect peace. Protect peace. I almost admired the nerve. An hour later, she edited the post and added more. She mentioned my service, framed it like a shield I hid behind. She implied I'd received a large payout and refused to help my own family. She didn't say how much. She didn't need to. The implication did the work for her. My phone started ringing. An aunt I barely spoke to asked why I was being so harsh. A cousin wanted to know if the money thing was true. Someone else suggested I apologize publicly to avoid more drama. I muted the notifications and made lunch. At some point, my mom shared the post, added a sad emoji and a sentence about how sometimes parents do everything they can and still get hurt. She didn't mention the part where she told me Christmas was better without me. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't care, because I did. I went through my day like normal. Meetings, emails, a run after work. My daughter talked about her day while we made dinner together. She asked if Grandma was mad at us. No, I said. She's just talking. That satisfied her. Kids don't need explanations. They need stability. After dinner, when my daughter settled in to watch a show, I sat down with my laptop. I didn't open Facebook. I opened my bank records. I scrolled back years, month by month, transfer after transfer. Utilities, repairs, just this once. I took screenshots, clear, time-stamped, undeniable. Then I opened my mom's old post from when my marriage ended, the one where she talked about helping me get back on my feet with a small amount and asked for prayers that I'd learn to manage better. I saved that too. I typed my response slowly, not angry, not defensive, just factual. I addressed my sister by name. I quoted her words from Christmas. I mentioned my daughter being present. I posted the receipts. I explained the help I'd given quietly for years, and the one time I asked for help and how it had been shared publicly. I ended with a single sentence. I didn't storm out. I left when I was told to leave. I posted it and closed the laptop. The shift was immediate. People started asking questions. Real ones. Wait, you were sending them money? Why would you post about helping your own kid? So you kicked her out and now want her money? My sister replied fast at first. Defensive. Sharp. She accused me of manipulating the narrative, of weaponizing screenshots, of attacking the family. Then she slowed down. Her replies got shorter, more frantic. My mom tried to message me privately. I didn't open it. My dad didn't comment at all. By the next morning, my sister edited the post again, removed some lines, clarified others. It didn't help. Screenshots don't disappear once they've been seen. She deleted the post entirely an hour later. That didn't stop the messages. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of spreading on its own once it was out in the open. At work, no one mentioned it. They never did. Professional boundaries stayed intact. That contrast didn't go unnoticed. That evening, my sister sent me a message. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. I stared at it while my daughter brushed her teeth. I typed back. You did that yourself. She didn't reply. Later, my mom sent a long text about misunderstandings and emotions running high, and how social media wasn't the place for family matters. She said we could all agree things had gone too far. Things had gone exactly where they'd been pushed. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed my daughter's lunch for the next day and signed a permission slip for a school trip. The mundane details mattered more than defending myself to people who'd already decided who I was. By the end of the week, the calls slowed. The messages stopped coming in waves. The noise settled into a low, resentful quiet. That's when I knew the public part was over. Not resolved, just exposed. And exposure changes how people move, even when they don't apologize. I shut my phone off before bed and sat in the dark living room for a few minutes listening to the house. Everything felt intact, not fragile, not braced for impact. Somewhere else my sister was explaining herself again, trying to patch a version of the story that no longer belonged to her. I turned off the light and went to bed knowing that silence when it comes after the truth sounds very different than the silence that comes from being ignored. By the weekend, the tone had changed. Not supportive, not hostile, curious. That's the stage people hit when they realize they picked the wrong side too quickly and don't know how to walk it back. I didn't reopen Facebook. I didn't need to. The messages told me everything. An aunt I'd always been polite with sent a short note. I didn't know you were helping them like that. A cousin followed. That post your sister made doesn't look good now. Someone else asked if my daughter was okay. That was the first question that mattered. I answered that one. She's fine. The rest I left alone. My sister tried again that afternoon, this time by text. No accusations, no outrage, just carefully chosen words. We never meant to hurt your child. I read it twice before responding. You did, she replied almost immediately. That's not fair. I set the phone down and went outside. The air was cold and clear, the kind that makes everything feel sharper. I stood on the porch and thought about how many times fairness had been brought up only when the balance shifted. When I went back inside, there were 3 missed calls from my mom. I let them sit. Later, my dad sent a message that didn't sound like him. People are asking questions. This is getting out of hand. Out of whose hand, I wondered. I typed back one sentence. I answered honestly when I was asked. No reply. Behind the scenes, I knew exactly what was happening. My sister was calling relatives, trying to explain. My mom was trying to calm people down without admitting anything. My dad was likely sitting quietly, hoping it would blow over. It didn't. Screenshots travel faster than apologies. Once people see a pattern, they don't unsee it. By Monday morning, my sister's name wasn't attached to sympathy anymore. It was attached to qualifiers. If that's true, I didn't realize she'd been supporting them. That changes things. My sister noticed too. She sent another message. You're letting people think I'm a villain. I stared at it for a moment. I typed back. You wrote the post. That was the end of that conversation. At work, my focus stayed intact. I did my job, met deadlines, took a call with my attorney during lunch, and confirmed the next steps. Everything moved forward exactly as scheduled. No drama, no leverage. That contrast grounded me. The system I trusted behaved predictably. The one I'd been born into never had. That evening, my mom showed up at my door with a cake. Chocolate, my sister's favorite. Of course it was. I didn't open the door right away. I watched through the peephole while my mom shifted her weight and checked her phone. My sister stood a few feet back, arms folded, jaw tight. My dad waited in the car. I opened the door just enough to step into the frame. Hi, my mom said too brightly. We just wanted to talk. I'm busy, I said. My sister leaned forward. We're trying to fix this. There's nothing to fix, I replied. My mom lifted the cake slightly. We brought something. I glanced at it. That doesn't help. My sister's expression hardened. You can't shut us out. I can, I said. You told me to. That was before she snapped. Before what I asked. She hesitated. Before people knew I finished. My mom winced. That's not fair. It's accurate, I said. My daughter appeared behind me in the hallway holding a book. My mom's face lit up. Sweetheart, she said. Come give Grandma a hug. My daughter didn't move. She looked up at me instead. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Go back to your room, I said gently. She nodded and disappeared down the hall. My sister watched her go, then looked back at me. See what you're doing? Yes, I said. I'm protecting her. You're punishing us, my mom said. No, I replied. I'm responding. My dad called from the car. Can we please just talk like adults? I looked past them at the street. You already did, my sister scoffed. You think posting screenshots makes you righteous? No, I said, it makes things clear. She shook her head. You always do this. You always make yourself the victim. I met her eyes. You told me to leave. She opened her mouth to argue. Nothing came out. My mom's voice dropped. We didn't know about the money. That's the problem, I said. You didn't know anything about me. My sister laughed short and bitter. Don't act like you're better than us now. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not better. I'm done. I stepped back and closed the door. I locked it. The cake stayed on the porch. I stood there for a moment listening to muffled voices through the door. Then footsteps. The car started. The sound faded. In the living room, my daughter sat on the couch, book in her lap. Are they mad? She asked. They're confused, I said. She nodded. Okay, that was it. No fear? No tears? Just acceptance. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A message from my sister. You've changed, I typed back. I stopped explaining. I set the phone aside and turned off the lights. Outside, the porch light illuminated the untouched cake for a while longer before it went dark. Inside, everything felt settled, not resolved, settled. And that distinction mattered more than anyone on the other side of the door wanted to admit. The cake sat on the porch until morning. I noticed it when I took the trash out, still boxed frosting slightly melted where the sun had hit the plastic lid. Chocolate, my sister's favorite. My mom always remembered that detail, even when she forgot others. I carried it inside and threw it away. By then, the tone had shifted again. The anger had burned off. What was left was strategy. My sister stopped texting. My mom started emailing, long messages this time, thoughtful ones. The kind that sound reasonable if you skim them. She wrote about family bonds and misunderstandings, about how everyone was under stress, about how social media had blown things out of proportion. She said they wanted to move forward, not dwell on the past. The past apparently was optional now. I didn't reply. That afternoon, my dad called. I answered because I knew what was coming. We need to sit down, he said. All of us. No, I replied. You're being stubborn, he said. Not angry. Disappointed. The tone he'd always used when he wanted compliance without debate. I'm being clear, I said. He sighed. Your sister is having a hard time with all this. I know, I said. She didn't mean what she said at Christmas. She said it clearly, I replied. That doesn't mean she meant it forever. I leaned against the kitchen counter and watched my daughter draw at the table. It doesn't have to be forever to matter. There was silence on the line. We raised you to forgive, my dad said finally. You raised me to listen, I said. I listened. He hung up without saying goodbye. Later that evening, my sister tried a new approach. She showed up alone. I watched her through the peephole as she straightened her jacket and practiced a neutral expression in the reflection of my door. She knocked softly, then again. I opened the door just enough to block the entry. I came to apologize, she said, for what I asked. Her eyes flicked past me into the house. For how things came out. That's not an apology, I said. She exhaled sharply. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I almost smiled. Say what you came to say, I told her. She folded her arms. Fine, I'm sorry you felt hurt. There it was. I waited. That's it, I asked. What do you want, she snapped. A performance. No, I said. I want honesty. She scoffed. You always do this. You always want more. I want accountability, I replied. Those are different things. She shifted her weight. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed yourselves, I said. Her jaw tightened. You didn't have to drag everyone into it. You did that, I said. I answered. She stared at me, searching for something. Leverage, guilt, familiar ground. You think this makes you powerful, she asked. No, I said. It makes me unavailable. Her eyes narrowed. So that's it, you're cutting us off. I'm setting rules, I replied. You don't get access to my daughter. You don't get access to my finances. And you don't get to rewrite what happened. She laughed sharp and bitter. You can't just decide that. I already did, I said. She took a step closer. Mom is heartbroken, I believe that, I said. You're tearing the family apart, she insisted. I shook my head. You did that when you told me to leave. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. The words didn't come. For once, she didn't have a script. From behind me, my daughter's footsteps sounded in the hallway. Is it okay, she asked softly. I turned slightly, keeping my body between them. Yes, I said. Go back to your room. She nodded and disappeared again. My sister watched her go, then looked at me with something close to disbelief. You're really doing this, she said. Yes, I replied. She stepped back, anger flashing. Don't come crying to us when you need help. I held her gaze. I won't. She lingered for another second, like she expected me to stop her. When I didn't, she turned and walked down the steps. I closed the door and locked it. Inside, the house felt exactly the same as it had before she arrived. Quiet, stable, predictable. That night, my phone buzzed again. A message from my mom. She's your sister. You'll regret this. I typed back one sentence. I regret not doing it sooner. I turned the phone off. The next day, my attorney confirmed the final paperwork had been submitted. The timeline was clear now. Nothing rushed. Nothing reversible. Just process moving forward the way it was designed to. At work, I signed off on reports and reviewed schedules. Leadership trusted me to make decisions without second-guessing. No one questioned my boundaries there. They were assumed. At home, my daughter asked if we could paint her room a different color. I told her yes. We picked samples and taped them to the wall. In the evening, I found another message waiting when I turned my phone back on. This time from my dad. You've made your point. I stared at it for a long moment. I typed back. This wasn't a point. It was a line. I set the phone down and joined my daughter on the floor, helping her hold up color swatches and decide which one felt right. Outside, the street was quiet. No cars idling, no shadows moving past the window, no one waiting for an invitation that wasn't coming. Inside, the air felt settled. Not heavy, not tense, just clear. And for the first time, I understood that the hardest part for them wasn't losing money or control or reputation. It was realizing that the door they'd slammed shut no longer opened from their side. The confirmation came on a Thursday afternoon. Not a call, not a dramatic email. Just a notice in my inbox with a reference number and a timeline. Funds scheduled. Documents finalized. The language was precise and unemotional, which was exactly how I preferred it. I forwarded the notice to my attorney and closed my laptop. Nothing in the house changed when the money became real. The lights didn't flicker. The walls didn't hum. My daughter didn't suddenly become a different kid. We still ate dinner at the same table. We still argued about bedtime. Stability isn't loud when it arrives. It just stays. I paid off what needed paying. Mortgage first, then the quiet list I'd been carrying in my head for years. Student loans, emergency fund, college account for my daughter with rules attached that no one else could touch. I invested conservatively. No flashy moves, no announcements. The absence of chaos felt like a luxury. Word traveled anyway. It always does. People talk when they don't have access anymore. My sister stopped trying to contact me directly. Instead, she tried indirectly. A cousin asked if I'd consider reconnecting. An aunt wondered if I'd thought about how much stress this was putting on my parents. I thanked them for their concern and didn't change anything. My parents sold their house a few months later. Downsized, complained about timing and interest rates and how nothing worked out the way they'd hoped. They told people they'd been blindsided, that they hadn't known how bad things were, that families fall apart when communication breaks down. They didn't mention Christmas. They didn't mention my daughter. My sister posted less online after that. When she did, it was vague. Quotes about forgiveness, about protecting energy, about letting go of toxic people without naming names. The comments were quieter. The enthusiasm had thinned out. I noticed something else too. When people stopped seeing me as available, they stopped asking me to fix things. Emergencies found new solutions. Problems adjusted. The world didn't end. At work, my schedule stayed full. I took on a mentoring role with a junior officer who reminded me of myself years ago. Capable, quiet. Used to being the one who handled things. I told her something I'd learned the hard way. Being reliable doesn't mean being unlimited, I said. She nodded like she'd been waiting to hear it. At home, my daughter's room turned a soft blue. We painted it together on a Saturday, music playing, paint splattering where it didn't matter. She laughed when she got it on my sleeve. I didn't mind. One night, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, she looked up at me. "Grandma hasn't called in a long time," she said. "No," I replied. "Is that okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It is." She considered that, then smiled and went back to brushing. That was the moment I knew I'd chosen right. Grief doesn't disappear when money shows up. It just untangles. I still missed what I'd hoped my family could be. I still caught myself reaching for my phone on holidays out of habit. But the ache was cleaner now, not mixed with fear or obligation. Occasionally, I heard updates through the grapevine. My sister complained about how close she'd been to a fresh start, how things would have been different if I hadn't overreacted. She used the number sometimes, 500,000, like saying it out loud might change the outcome. It didn't. What haunted them wasn't the money itself. It was the proximity, knowing exactly how close they'd been, knowing the decision that tipped it, knowing they'd said the quiet part out loud in front of the wrong person. That knowledge has weight. I never reached out to correct their version of events. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. The rest were background noise. One afternoon, my dad sent a message I hadn't expected. "I hope you're doing well." No apology, no request, just a sentence. I read it, then set the phone down. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Life moved forward the way it does when you stop negotiating your boundaries. Slowly, steadily, without drama. My daughter grew. School projects turned into after-school activities. She made friends. She learned which adults were safe and which ones weren't worth explaining herself to. I watched her confidence build without interference. That was the real return on investment. I didn't become someone new. I became less accessible to the parts of my past that expected endless compliance. I stopped confusing endurance with love. When people asked if I regretted how things ended, I answered honestly. "I regret that it had to happen that way," I said. "I don't regret stopping." They usually nodded. The ones who didn't weren't asking for my answer anyway. On the anniversary of that Christmas, I cooked dinner at home, just the two of us. We made too much food, laughed when something burned, watched a movie we'd already seen. No speeches, no symbolism, just a night that didn't require anyone to shrink. Before bed, my daughter hugged me and said, "I like our house." "So do I replied. After she fell asleep, I sat in the living room for a while, the house quiet and settled around me, not empty, complete. I thought about the line my sister crossed and the one I drew in response. I thought about how long it had taken me to understand that protecting my child didn't require permission. I hadn't abandoned my family. I'd stopped serving people who treated me like I was expendable. And in doing that, I'd built something they could never take from us.